The release of Chris Hani's killer, Janusz Waluś, on parole has been met with shock at the Young Communist League conference underway in Ekurhuleni, the Communist Party. The SSCP had called for the parole to be suspended because they had gone to court on a rescission application. Our reporter Govan Whittles in Boksburg for you now. Govan, good afternoon to you. What's the view of the Young Communist League there?
Well, you mentioned it there, Stephen. They are shocked, and this decision by the Justice Ministry comes in the middle of their conference. It's also come on the day that the Communist Party and the ANC and COSATU are marching to the High Court in Limpopo, ironically calling for the release of Janusz Waluś on parole to be delayed pending that rescission application. There are a number of elements to this story. Janusz Waluś being released after recovering in the hospital, in the correctional center Kgosi Mampuru in Pretoria. He's been released, taken to a safe location. The Department of Correctional Services expected to keep him safe from attacks from the public. Remember, he was stabbed just a day after word was spread that he would be released on parole. And just a day after that, we saw almost 1,000 people marching to the Kgosi Mampuru Correctional Center in Pretoria. That march led by the South African Communist Party, and joining them at that march was the Young Communist League. They all had choice words for Janusz Waluś, and they believed that the decision of the Constitutional Court to order his release was flawed, but they also disagreed with Janusz Waluś's behavior while incarcerated, insisting that he hasn't told the whole truth about the assassination of Chris Hani. Joining me to discuss some of these elements and the response is the Secretary of the Young Communist League, Ntini. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Ntini. Let's begin with the Young Communist League's reaction to the news that Janusz Waluś has now been released on parole, and he will be on parole for 2 years here in South Africa.
Thank you, and greetings to the viewers of 4-5. Surely it's not a shock because you know that the decision was taken by an apex court which have portrayed itself to be the alpha and omega, of legal issues. But the disappointment remains there because you will remember that when we took it to the streets marching to Kgosi Mampuru, we even further highlighted that we have taken some legal steps. In particular, we have filed papers with the Constitutional Court itself to can be able to rescind their decision, because we believe that there's a gross violation of some of the constitutional sections, because while you want to exercise the right within the Constitution, you need to make sure you balance and not to undermine or violate the other right. And we believe that there were some violations and gross mistakes that in the judgment happens. For an example, firstly, the judgment never took into cognizance the argument from both the Hani family, including from the South African Communist Party. And we have believed that surely, as part of, as you apply for parole, sometimes there's what we call victim offender dialogue, because you need to present yourself and show remorse even to the family. And unfortunately, these things never happened. It is in that point that we felt Janusz must not be released. But again, obviously, has not divulged the truth, and we believe that justice is when he will be able to say that no, even if I'm the one who pulled the trigger, but the reality is that these are the people that send me. At least it's something that we may bid find justice. But again, we have taken to the streets and will continue, because we'll remember that 2023 marks the 30th anniversary since the assassination of our former General Sec. So even next week we'll have an exercise on the 15th of December with all our allied structures and society at large, and we will do so up until the 10th of April. But you could see what the judgment itself has done. A few days after the Concord ruling, we saw the memorial site of Comrade Chris Hani was vandalized and these are acts of provocation. And with no doubt, it's clear that is this the same right-wing people that are still hell-bent on killing and assassinating Comrade Chris every day. They want to repeat the same thing.
So, what do you think of the fact that the decision in its explanation by the Justice Ministry makes no mention of the rescission application? And it seems that this decision to release him on parole was taken despite that application being launched. And do you have any update on where that application is currently?
No, we have not yet got an update, but obviously we didn't forward the papers to the Justice Ministry. But surely what we would have expected is that pending the case itself, if we're filed, then there should have been delays. And wonder that why the rush of releasing, because you'll remember that just days after the announcement, actually his legal representatives were highlighting that he was not willing to accept even the decision of the Minister of Home Affairs to grant him a special permit or citizenship. So we are not sure if all these processes have already been finalized for the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services to ultimately release him. Are they satisfied? Have they verified the addresses or what? Because you may even be dealing with a no-man state person, especially if he didn't accept to sign what Minister Mtswaledi gave as a special permit for him to serve. But surely as long as he serves even his sentence being in South Africa, because one thing that we're heavily opposed to, especially as the SACP, the YCL and the Hani family, was the issue of either then, because there are some prescriptions within the parole guidelines that foreign nationals, when they are released, they need to be deported. And this is one issue that we're very much opposed to say that firstly the embassy of Poland was clear that they will not be able to enforce the parole conditions if then he gets to be deported. So at least we still find a bit of comfort that he will serve that parole sentence here, because surely he's not yet free. He must then continue. Every day we must know that he's reporting at least to a nearest police station, and we know that he's still within the country.
Where does this leave the campaign to defend Chris Hani's legacy? We know that you've called for an inquest, but with regards to Janusz Waluś, what will you be doing?
No, look, once we call for the inquest, then we believe that ultimately it shall be granted. You'll recall that when we called for the inquest on Comrade Ahmed Timol, we wanted to find justice and the truth. And ultimately, the inquest assisted us because we ultimately knew what happened to Comrade Timol. And we believe that if then we can follow that route, ultimately something will come on, and then the family will be able to find a bit of justice. Because the problem is that the man is unrepentant and he has never shown remorse. Because firstly, what he committed was an I-class decision. That's why even when at a particular time they were engaging at the parole board, he openly said, no, look, I may regret to have killed Chris Hani, but I don't regret to have killed a communist. So that on itself puts actually the life of communists as if they are not valued in this country, or every communist then may be subjected to any persecution because serious those things. But again, the last issue, we don't understand why do you separate the issue of Walus from Clive W. Lewis. Because if you remember, before he could pass on, he made a documentary, and in that interview, he was still clear himself that if then he gets an opportunity to repeat the same act, he could. So you could see that here there was no signs of repentance from these people, because to them they wanted to kill an idea, wanted to kill a system, not just even a person alone. So it means that communists will continue to be an endangered species in this country of South Africa.
Thank you so much. That's Tinyiko Ntini. He's the secretary of the Young Communist League, speaking to us on the sidelines of their conference where they'll be electing new leaders. And it's clear that they'll accept that decision, Stephen, but they'll continue with the call for the inquest. Of course, that call has not been answered just yet by the National Prosecuting Authority, and it's something that we expect to hear from the General Secretary of the SACP, who is due to address this conference tomorrow.
Govan, Whittles, thank you very much indeed for that live update from the Young Communist League conference in Boksburg in Ekurhuleni.